This is the story of two massive warships, one British, the other German, which were sunk in the North Atlantic 60 years ago. Over 3,500 men died. Only 118 survived. This year, a Channel 4 expedition set out to find those ships and unravel the mysteries behind their sinkings. On the 24th of May 1941, the mighty HMS Hood, the biggest ship in the Royal Navy, faced the legendary German battleship Bismarck. Their encounter was one of the last great battleship confrontations. Witnesses were aghast at the scale of the destruction. Captains of nearby ships were ordered to sketch what they saw. HMS Hood, the undisputed master of the seas, was hit by Bismarck. Moments later, she was rent in two by a towering explosion 600 feet high. She sank in less than 2 minutes. In the history of naval battles, it was by far the most cataclysmic sinking ever. And the loss rocked the British people. For HMS Hood was no ordinary ship.
The Hood was the most loved of all the ships in the Navy.
She'd shown the flag round the world, and she was the biggest ship and the most beautiful ship in the Navy.
You see, the Hood was an icon, with the awful modern word, an icon. The Hood was the mighty Hood, she was called, and the idea of the Hood being vaporized in about 2.5 minutes was ghastly.
HMS Hood was a household name for 20 years. Now she's a distant memory. But for some, the sinking of HMS Hood will never be forgotten. On the anniversary of the catastrophe, the Hood Association meet at the Little Norman Church at Boulder in Hampshire. Former sailors who served on Hood, the families and friends who lost loved ones, they all meet to remember HMS Hood and her crew. Amongst them is Ted Briggs. Out of a ship's crew of 1,418, only 3 men escaped as the ship plummeted to the seabed. Ted is the only one alive today.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. We will remember them.
Like the families of the men who died, Ted has many unanswered questions. How could a ship as big and heavily armoured as Hood sink so quickly? An Admiralty inquiry admitted the evidence was contradictory and inconclusive. It's been said that her design was flawed, that her steel was brittle, that the admiral on board made a wrong decision. Experts now believe that somehow Hood's own rear magazines, her ammunition stores, were hit, exploded, and broke the ship in two. But Ted has another question, which has haunted him for 60 years. Why did he and only 2 other men survive? The Portsmouth Naval War Memorial. The year 1941 is dominated by the lost sailors of Hood.
These are all my branch, signalman, etc. Tuxworth is there. We were going into action. He said, if you remember, in the Exeter, there was only one signalman saved. I said, well, if there's only going to be one signalman saved here, it'd be me. I was just joking. That's what happened. I can see it. I can see it all happening again. And the main part I remember is the bows, standing like that, going down, and not another soul in sight anywhere. Not even the other 2. I didn't see them until it was all over. But I just couldn't get over it. I just couldn't believe it.
60 years on, there's now hope of some answers for Ted and the families of those who died. American-born David Mearns is a director of Blue Water Recoveries. He has a rare expertise to locate and investigate shipwrecks which lie at the outer limits of deep ocean research. In his career, he's found over 40 wrecks for cargo companies and governments. His dream is an expedition that many have said is impossible: to find and film the wreck of the mighty HMS Hood. For 6 years, David trawled through Admiralty papers at the Public Records Office. Finally, he found the vital clues he needed. Transmissions sent from a British ship which was shadowing the battle, HMS Norfolk.
This is the received wireless transmission from Norfolk. Actually, we have 2 here. When I finally stumbled across these 2 pages, it really gave me the confidence that we could find Hood. I mean, these were the key things. Our confidence is largely based on the quality of these positions. Their first source, they're from a ship, right on the heels of the battle. They've updated their position. They've checked their position. They had great motivation to try and get the most accurate position because they knew lives depended on it. And so it couldn't get really any better than that.
Back at his office in Midhurst in Sussex, David took all the clues he'd found and plotted them onto naval charts.
So this is essentially my manual re-navigation of the action, all the ships involved, and all the primary and secondary clues for the sinking position. You know, there's no such thing as a treasure map with an X on it, and you go there, and that's where the treasure is, or that's where the wreck is. They don't exist. All the factors that influence that, the accuracy of that position, the size of the vessel, the stability of the vessel, what the weather was like, you know, these are approximate. There's error involved in that, whether it's potentially 3 miles, 5 miles, 10 miles, and we make a judgment on what we feel the error is. And on the basis of that, we sort of draw up what we call our search box.
Hood lies in treacherous Arctic waters between Greenland and Iceland. She is also nearly 2 miles below the surface. To find and film Hood would be a major achievement. Unlike commercial wrecks, battleships are not open to salvage. After lengthy negotiation, David finally received British government permission to film HMS Hood. But he also wanted the blessing of the family and friends of the lost men.
I've always said if the HMS Hood Association or Ted Briggs were unhappy with our plans and said, you know, we don't want you to do this, we would stop immediately. But you know, hopefully this will make sure that the memory of Hood and all those people who were lost on her is never forgotten. I have to say I'm very pleased to be here again, 6 years later, from the first time I was invited to this reunion dinner. And so I'm very pleased to be here to say that this year we will mount an expedition to locate Hood and to film her.
Like quite a few people, I thought, no, she's a war grave and she should be treated as such. And it wasn't until my own chum said to me afterwards, he said, what's your objection? And that's, well, you know, war grave and all that type of thing. And he said, well, if you went into a graveyard and took a photograph of your mother's grave, would you regard that as a desecration? And it was a result of that that I thought, well, hang on a minute, it is really a good thing.
Should we go upstairs? Yeah.
The stage was set for a remarkable historic event. Channel 4 agreed to fund David Mearn's deep ocean search for the Hood. But it soon became clear that this super high-tech, multi-million-pound expedition would not be complete without catching a glimpse of the other sunken giant at the heart of this story, Bismarck. The biggest German warship ever built, Bismarck has been found before in 1989 when underwater video technology was relatively crude. But locating her again won't be easy. The original expedition took 2 years to find her and kept her location secret. She is 3.5 miles down and in treacherous terrain, somewhere in the middle of an underwater mountain range. Summer 2001, Cork Island. David Mearns mobilized an international team of deep ocean experts and some of the most advanced underwater search technology in the world. The plan is to first scan the ocean floor with sonar to locate the wrecks. Then a remote-controlled vehicle, the ROV, will descend 5 times beyond the reach of a nuclear submarine. At these huge depths, it will film each ship.
These are very expensive expeditions. A lot of people invest a lot of time and effort into going out and first off being successful in finding it. That's one thing. I can sit here today and say I have a fantastic track record and be very confident in finding it, but There is no guarantee to that. I can't put my hand on my heart and say it's actually going to happen.
What started as a dream 6 years ago at last gets underway at midnight as David's research vessel, the Northern Horizon, slips her mooring in Ireland and heads out into the vast expanse of the North Atlantic. This is a voyage of over 3,000 miles. Its goal is to gaze once more upon the last great battleships. May 1941 was a dark time for Great Britain. The whole of Europe was in the hands of Nazi Germany. Dunkirk had fallen. America was still neutral. Pearl Harbor was months away. The citizens of London, Liverpool, Hull and Coventry were suffering the worst ever nights of the Blitz. Britain's only lifeline was the North Atlantic convoys from Canada and the USA. But these ships carrying vital food and materials were under constant attack. German U-boats and warships had destroyed 700,000 tons of merchant shipping in April alone. Britain's survival hung in the balance. Today, the Northern Horizon search vessel is crossing those same shipping lanes where the battle in the Atlantic was fought. On board is renowned naval historian Dr. Eric Grove. He's an expert on World War II, an era when control of the sea was central to Britain's war effort.
It costs the same to transport 1 ton of coal from Australia to England as it does to transport it from the port to the power station. That gives you some impression of the enormous advantages of transporting things by sea. And so therefore, if you can control that mode of transport, particularly if you're fighting a maritime empire like Britain in the 1940s, you've got your fingers on the enemy's jugular. And that's what the Battle of the Atlantic was all about.
From the outset of war, Britain had been worried about Bismarck. Launched in 1939, this hugely powerful ship was a potentially fatal threat to the Atlantic lifeline. Bismarck was 790 feet long. She had 8 massive 15-inch guns, 13-inch thick armor, and a top speed of 30 knots. She was alleged to be unsinkable. She was certainly the most powerful military weapon in the world. But she'd yet to become operational. The British watched and waited. Then, on the 20th of May 1941, intelligence from Sweden and Norway confirmed their worst fears. Bismarck had been sighted heading towards the Atlantic. Bismarck had to be found before she got to the shipping lanes. With her speed and firepower, she could decimate merchant shipping before the Royal Navy had a chance to respond. The British went onto a high state of alert. One young naval lieutenant who took part in the pursuit of Bismarck was the broadcaster, Sir Ludovic Kennedy.
I mean, the Bismarck was a wonderful ship, absolutely wonderful. I mean, majestic in her appearance, threatening, menacing, powerful, enormously powerful, but with these wonderful lines. And she was the best, biggest, and most wonderful ship I've ever seen. And I think most people who saw her thought of that as well. But she had to be destroyed. I mean, if she got out in the Atlantic, I mean, I don't say we were finished, but we'd been up against it.
For 2 days, British ships and aircraft scoured the Norwegian coast for Bismarck. A long-range RAF Spitfire spotted her in a fjord and took this photograph. But Bismarck slipped away in the night. Tension was high. The problem for the British Navy was guessing where Bismarck would enter the Atlantic. There were 4 possible routes. Groups of British cruisers, smaller, faster ships, were sent to patrol the farthest routes. If they sighted Bismarck, they were to follow her and call in the big guns. The home fleet, based in the Orkneys, would cover the other 2. The Navy's giant battlecruiser, HMS Hood, along with the brand new battleship, the Prince of Wales, were sent to take up stations south of Iceland, ready to engage Bismarck if she was spotted.
21st of May, we left Scapa Flow, and there were strong rumours going around about a battleship being out. We weren't unduly impressed because we'd had so many false alarms.
Not only were the crew unperturbed, they were also supremely confident in HMS Hood, not least Ted Briggs. At the age of 13, he'd marvelled at the sight of the Hood and dreamt of serving on her.
Well, she was the pride of the British fleet, and she was the be-all and end-all, as far as the Navy was concerned.
But Hood's formidable reputation was earned in peacetime. For years, Hood had toured the world as a symbol of British naval power. Since her launch in 1918, she had reigned supreme in an era of battleship diplomacy. At over 860 feet long, she was the Navy's biggest ship and the emblem of their global might. From 1923 to 1924, she voyaged throughout the Empire, traveling 40,000 miles and receiving over 700,000 visitors. But behind the fun and games on deck, Hood was a subtle reminder of who ruled the waves.
If you wanted something to appear on a cigarette card, on the front of a magazine, in a film or something, if you wanted a symbol of Britain's remaining naval supremacy, at least as top equal with the United States, then HMS Hood provided it.
Imperial symbol she may have been, but by 1941 she was old technology. She was designed in the First World War, and construction began on her in Glasgow in 1916. But suddenly the work was halted. 3 British battlecruisers had just been sunk at the Battle of Jutland by the Germans. As the Admiral at the scene commented, there seemed to be something wrong with the design of British ships. What was wrong with the British ships was that they had insufficient deck armour. For decades, warships had heavy steel side or belt armour. But over the years, as guns got more powerful and could be fired over longer ranges, shells were now plunging down from greater heights. Bill Durans is a forensic expert and advisor to the US Navy. On board the Northern Horizon, he explains why navies started to get worried by high plunging shells.
Plunging fire is anything that is going down steeply enough so that it's not really intercepting any of the belt armor before it hits the decks. That's the stuff that's dangerous, because that goes right through into the magazine areas and right through into the engineering spaces.
Hood was quickly redesigned, but crucially, only the front half of the ship was given extra deck armor in a bid to keep the weight down. The intention had always been to have her in for a refit and strengthen the back part of the ship, particularly over the back ammunition magazines. Somehow, with all her diplomatic goodwill missions, there never seemed to be the right time. Hood and the Prince of Wales crept along the south side of Iceland ready to engage Bismarck. On board Hood was Admiral Lancelot Holland. His orders were to quickly get in close to enemy ships. At short range, enemy shells would hit Hood's thick side armor. Holland knew he must not expose Hood's weak upper armor to long-range plunging shells. But would Hood be able to get in close? At 7:22 on the evening of Friday the 23rd of May, able seaman Newell on board the British cruiser HMS Suffolk got the shock of his life. Within minutes, Suffolk's sister ship, HMS Norfolk, was transmitting this message to the fleet. Emergency. One battleship, one cruiser bearing 330 degrees, range 7 miles. Newell had sighted Bismarck, accompanied by the heavy cruiser Prince Eugen, trying to slip into the Atlantic via the Denmark Strait. Suffolk and Norfolk started to shadow her, broadcasting her position to Hood and Prince of Wales. Admiral Holland did not reply. He simply set an interception course. By maintaining radio silence, he hoped to come upon the Germans unawares. Up on the Hood's bridge, things started to happen. The 18-year-old signalman Ted Briggs was so excited he risked punishment by asking a senior officer a question.
Well, the enemy report came through, and I said to the flag lieutenant, what is actually happening? He said, well, we've got the enemy report, and we shall be in action within the next few hours. And it was then that we realised that, yes, we were going into action, and it wasn't just a rumour. We were absolutely thrilled. As a thrill went through the whole ship. Didn't realise what it was going to be like.
But at midnight, Suffolk lost the Bismarck in a snow squall. Without her radio updates, Hood was sailing blind. By 2 a.m., Holland knew the Germans must be agonizingly close. Then at 2:47, the radio crackled into life again. It was Suffolk reporting she regained contact. Holland's navigators sprang into life, trying to plot the best possible interception. Bismarck and Prince Eugen were only 15 miles away, but they were slightly ahead of the Hood and Prince of Wales. Holland tried to narrow the gap. Both forces were going virtually flat out, upwards of 30 knots. At 5:37 in the morning, Holland made his move. He had his ships turn and race in at full speed, straight at the Germans. He was desperate to get in close to avoid plunging shells.
The ideal situation for the British would have been to do this. That is, cut in front of Bismarck and then being able to fire with all of their guns while Bismarck could only engage with 1 or 2 of her forward guns. In reality, the Germans, having seen this becoming a possibility, could just simply turn this way and negate that. So that's a tough one. Holland ended up coming up like this in a kind of pursuit curve, trying to catch Bismarck from behind.
At 5:53 a.m., the British opened the firing. But because they were trying to get in close, the British ships were charging straight at the Germans. Only their front guns had an unimpeded view of the target. Admiral Holland had to judge exactly when he was close enough to avoid plunging enemy shells. Then he could safely turn side on and have all his guns fire. he was only seconds away from this ideal position.
Holland was closing the range as rapidly as he could. Both ships are quite fast, keep in mind. And he was just at the stage where he felt that he was in close enough now that he could turn a little bit more broadside to and open up the arcs of his after guns. And it was just as that turn was being started or completed that the fatal shell hit the hood.
Witnesses disagree about this crucial turn to port. Some say she was in the middle of it. Others say it never happened. If Hood had completed it, her side armor would have taken the brunt of the hit and she would have survived. But it wasn't to be. This is the actual film taken from the German cruiser Prinz Eugen of the Bismarck firing at HMS Hood. Each time she fired, a salvo of 8 shells, each weighing over a ton, left the guns at nearly twice the speed of sound. They had over 10 miles to travel. The journey time was under 30 seconds.
It was as we turned that the last salvo hit. We were thrown off our feet, and all I saw was a whacking great sheet of flame that shot round the compass platform.
Ominously, according to witnesses, the hit was somewhere on the back half of the deck, exactly the area that was under-armored. Immediately, the hood began to sink.
People started to get out towards the starboard door of the compass platform. It was as I got there, Commander Warren, the navigating officer, stood to one side and a polite little gesture just like that. And that sticks out.
Ted Briggs and many others like Commander Warren just managed to get out of the top decks. But they were instantly dragged down by the enormous suction as the ship sank rapidly.
And I'd given up. I'd lost all the terror and all the fright. I was just accepting it. My lungs had got to bursting point, I think. And I just... And that was when I shut up.
At the very point of death, Ted Briggs was suddenly propelled to the surface. Quite how, to this day, no one knows.
I was about 50 yards away from it. And it was towering way above me.
On that terrible day in 1941, Ted Briggs thought he'd be the last person ever to see the mighty Hood. The last resting place of HMS Hood is halfway between Greenland and Iceland. David Mearns and his team on board the Northern Horizon arrive in near-perfect weather. They will need it. Hood is a needle in a haystack. David's search area is over 600 miles square. This ambitious search will start by scouring the ocean floor with sonar. This is no ordinary sonar. It will travel to a world as hostile to human life as outer space. It will operate in freezing, pitch-black water at immense pressures that would crush normal submarines. Its journey is to the floor of the Atlantic Ocean, nearly 2 miles below.
It's a relief that that's done. Now, you know, it's just a matter of driving the ship straight. And, you know, we should know our answer in about, well, in about 6 to 7 hours, whether we're right or not.
The ship will travel up and down the search area in parallel lines. Behind it, it will pay out over 4 miles of steel cable. When the sonar is floating just above the seabed, it will send up a continuous stream of images. As the sonar descends, David, Eric, and Bill prepare themselves for what they might see.
But isn't it possible that the foretop was...
They want to find evidence to confirm the idea that the shell from the Bismarck penetrated the rear ammunition magazines. If so, they should find the ship split in two at that point.
A 15-inch round going through the foretop probably wouldn't have intercepted the ship at all.
Right, probably in at least 2 pieces, and there could even be a third piece, a large piece. Whatever the case, there is going to be a lot of debris on the seabed because, you know, she suffered a catastrophic, you know, sinking, and she sank very fast. So in that sort of instance, you would expect just by the violence of the sinking, a lot of her deck equipment could be, you know, sort of washed away. Railings will be ripped off, the funnels could be gone, the superstructure could be gone. We don't know whether she's turned over or not. If she has, it's extremely likely that all of the turrets have come out.
The sonar is now at its operational depth, 350 meters above the seabed. As the ship crawls along the center line of the search area, David is transfixed by the slowly passing, almost featureless image of the sea floor far below.
My speciality is interpreting images. And yeah, I have a background in geology, so if you want to tell the difference between a wreck and a rock, it's good to know what a rock looks like. And as a geologist, that helps.
The search area is massive, much bigger than a major city. Every line through the search area takes 10 hours. The first ends at 1:20 in the morning without a single trace of Hood. The ship then has to turn around. That takes another 5 hours because of the 4 miles of cable it's dragging behind. Line 2 starts at 6:30 the next morning. Everyone is determined to stay at their posts. Then something starts to break out of the desert-like sea bottom.
Holy shit. Can't believe it. Yeah, we've got it. I mean, there's a shadow there. It could be, we have to let this play out. It feels too big, and it has some signs that...
It's a false alarm. David's geological experience tells him what the others may think is a likely target is in fact a rocky outcrop.
No. No, I don't think it's us.
Whales track the ship on the port bow for half an hour. They turn out to be a good omen. For on only line 3 out of a possible 15, the sonar picks up something man-made.
2 pixels wide, isn't it?
A bit of Hood?
It's too early to say because we haven't seen anything else, but it's definitely extremely hard. This red here means that it's essentially returning 100%. That scale there is his intensity scale. He's looking at a different set of colors than we are. And red is 100%. So that thing is as hard as you could possibly measure with the sonar. This could be, you know, the first bit of debris, and there's you know, the wreck's on the other side of it, or we're going to start seeing things coming up. But it's definitely the type of thing we're looking for as a clue, the first clue. But it's not the hull or anything like that. It also could be just an isolated piece of man-made debris or a rock that's fooling us, but it looks a bit more like the real thing.
It does.
The ship turns and starts line 4. Another 14 hours go by, but no one wants to go to bed when the goal is in sight.
That's a piece of something. I think this is it. 2 pieces. Here's the second one coming with a shadow. Right down the middle. That's it. That's Hood.
After 60 years hidden from the world, it looks as though Hood has now been found. The only way to confirm the find is to send down the eyes of the mission, the ROV, the remote-controlled submersible. Until then, celebrations are on hold.
Don't know what to do with myself now. I'll have a drink of water, I think.
The final high-definition sonar image is a unique map of a battle-strewn landscape hidden from human eyes for generations. It's both revelatory and puzzling. It shows not 2, but 4 large pieces and a mass of smaller debris, all spread over an area 2 miles wide. The largest part is most likely Hood's main hull, but when David measures the sonar image on the computer, he gets the impression Hood is lying on her side. We might not see the beauty of the ship as she once was.
Yeah, it's a bit worrying because the breadth of the vessel out here would be about 33 meters, and at best we're measuring that target about half that. And it could be that what we're seeing, that measurement across the target face there, is this measurement here, which would be closer to that. So I think we have to be prepared for that, unfortunately. Which would be a bit of a disappointment. Because we wanted to find her, upright, proud and defiant to the end.
The Magellan ROV is an ultra-deep-sea, remote-controlled submersible, bristling with state-of-the-art video cameras and high-powered lights. It's attached by a 100-foot-long umbilical cord to the depressor, a separate unit that houses all its support systems. Together, the whole system is connected to the ship by 2 miles of steel cable, inside which are power and fiber optics. The journey time to the bottom is 2.5 hours.
Okay, 8:10 on the bottom.
Yeah, Dave, everything around us, we're covered up. I'm on a 225-foot range now.
Okay, I think in the sort of big scheme of things, we should try to see if we're in one of these debris fields, because if we are, then we know the wreck is to the south.
Yeah, roger that. I mean, just by looking at the sonar right now, we're in somebody's debris field.
Yeah, okay.
The ROV heads towards the largest piece of the wreck. On the way is an underwater landscape littered with debris. It's hard to identify any particular part. Unusually for these depths, there is a high current. It's stirring up silt and is affecting visibility.
You're going to see a lot of that twisted metal.
Then, out of the murk comes an extraordinary sight. A towering cavern of metal, the end shorn clean off.
Jesus, look at that. Whatever that is absolutely just folded and thrust up. It's like peeled open like a can opener. That's the side of the ship. There it is. That's HMS Hood.
David Mearns and his team gaze in awe at the very first video pictures of a sleeping giant. This is the former pride of the British Navy, the mighty HMS Hood. And now David has promised to make a phone call.
Hello?
Yeah, Ted, can you hear me? It's David.
David, hello. David, how are you?
Everything's going very well, Ted. And I just thought you'd like to know I've just spent the last hour looking at pictures live from the seabed of your ship.
Oh, God bless you.
So we found her, Ted.
Good. Well done.
We're here looking at the ship, and we know what it means to a lot of people, but we certainly know what it means to you. So
Indeed, yes. All right, David. Thank you very much.
all right, very good.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye. Yep. He's done it well and truly.
Ted Briggs is the sole remaining survivor of the Hood. He came into the Channel 4 newsroom to see those pictures of the ship on which he served as a teenaged ordinary seaman on that appalling day 60 years ago.
Despite the emotions, Ted is soon caught up in the remarkable success of David's mission. The first underwater pictures are beamed back via satellite. It's an event of historic proportions and makes the headlines the next day. As the world hears about the incredible discovery of his ship, Ted packs to leave for Iceland.
How's about that?
The expedition will take him back to where it all began 60 years earlier.
What we're doing is, hopefully it's a great thing, but it's not an easy thing. The easy route would be for him to stay home in Fairham and have a look at the video pictures by himself. So I think what he's doing is a terribly brave thing.
With only their 5th shot ever fired in combat, the gunners of Bismarck hit and sank HMS Hood at a distance of 10 miles. How did they achieve such deadly accuracy so quickly? The film taken from the German cruiser Prinz Eugen shows how both sides in this battle were trying to sink an enemy ship which, to the naked eye, was just a tiny dot on the horizon. The huge pall of smoke is the sinking Hood. The tiny flash to the left is gunfire from Hood's escort, the brand new battleship Prince of Wales. Geoffrey Brooke was a gunnery officer on HMS Prince of Wales. On board the only surviving World War II British warship, HMS Belfast, he explains how ships of the time were able to hit moving targets at long distance.
Until about 1908 or so, all the guns were fired, laid and fired, and everything from actually at the guns. But this wasn't very satisfactory, because in the middle of an action, when there's smoke and shells and water spouts and God knows what not, it's very hard for the men controlling the guns to concentrate. So somebody had the bright idea of shoving a director very high up in the ship.
On the gun directors were mounted rangefinders, two huge telescopes mounted 30 feet apart, with both telescopes pointing at the target. The angle between the two would give the range. But getting the two telescopes to point at the target was down to the skill of the operator.
Our own rangefinders were just the same as you have in, for instance, an old Leica camera. You saw a picture that you were looking at, and it was in two halves, and the top half was not immediately above the lower half. You could get them to coincide like that by twisting a knob at the side. And when you'd done it, you looked at a little window which is also worked by the knob, and it said range 080 or something, which is 8,000 yards.
But getting the range of the target was only the first problem.
In addition to knowing the range to the target reasonably accurately, you had wind conditions to take into account, and temperatures, powder temperatures, gun elevation angles, wear of guns, all sorts of other things like that that would make your first couple of shots generally fall in a different place than one expected anyway.
To deal with all those variables, navies turned to a high-tech solution.
Well, here we are in the transmitting station, TS for short, which is if the director was the brains of the gunnery system, the TS is really the heart. I haven't been in a thing like this for 59 years. This is a very early type of mechanical computer. If you could see inside it, this thing is absolutely solid to the ground, with differentials and cams and electric motors and cogwheels and heaven knows what not. And they all are worked by these things. They can't do it because they're clamped shut. But there are men standing all around here putting on various parameters.
This early mechanical computer was fed various data: the range to the enemy, their course, the wind speed and air temperature. Operated by 8 men, it constantly calculated the exact angle the guns had to be set at to hit the target.
It was very reliable. It must have cost millions.
But whatever the technology, battleships were never at rest. Firing from a moving, rolling, pitching platform was immensely difficult. Either side would still only be able to get around 1 in 100 shells on target.
Getting shots on target is very largely a matter of luck. That Prince of Wales got several hits and Hood got none, where Hood was a fully worked up ship, fully experienced, and Prince of Wales was full of new people, indicates exactly how sporadic and erratic the whole thing is. Good gunnery counts in the long run statistically, but in the short run of engagements like that, it depends very much on how the gods are feeling that day. It's the fog of war.
Timing in this clash of titans was crucial. Only seconds before Hood could turn her 10-inch thick side armor towards the German ships, she was hit. The Bismarck's crew were probably among the most accurate gunners afloat. But the fact remains that even they were incredibly lucky to score a lethal hit with only their 5th shot.
I mean, this is obviously a broken end. We don't know whether it's the bow is broken or we know the after end is broken, but whether the bow in addition is broken.
On board the research vessel Northern Horizon, David Mearns and his team are amazed by the devastation they are seeing to Hood's main hull.
A wreck is a very appropriate thing to call this, what we're looking at, because it is a wreck. It's just, a very sad sight.
But the ROV survey of the wreck is starting to yield answers to 60-year-old mysteries. Hood's stern, her back end, is missing from the main hull. This confirms the major explosion was in the back part of the ship. There's also a lot of damage right along the hull caused by the pressures of sudden sinking.
As the hull went up and submerged, the engineering spaces imploded, and then the hull girder, which is usually a very large thing, gets really squashed down into like a piece of rope, and then it just twists off. That's a sign of a catastrophic implosion, a truly catastrophic implosion. It's like being crushed in a giant fist. And then when the plating gives way, the general result is instantaneous. The water does not come in like in a flood, like you picture somehow, sort of water pouring in your watertight door. The water comes in, it's like a slug, it's almost like a solid piece of steel. It just takes everything in its path. So, as I say, the end is very quick, it's very merciful, but the confusion below decks must have been awful. Laying in some odd position in a ship that's now vertical. Lights are out, strange things are coming off the bulkheads and falling all around you. And there's this horrible noise, probably louder than you can tolerate, and the pressure in the compartment is going up as it's being squeezed. And then, in the wink of an eye, it's over.
The giant steel hull of Hood is now a huge piece of torn and twisted metal. But this at least lays to rest one old theory. Hood's steel was not brittle. It bent considerably before cracking. Then, as the ROV gets to the front end of the hull, there's another surprise. Not only has the back of the ship been blown off, so has the front. The ROV sets off through the debris field to try and locate the lost ends of the ship. On the way are reminders that this was once a living, working warship. Torpedoes, electrical equipment, and most poignantly, sailors' work boots. In a heap of tangled metal is the very heart of the ship's life, the rallying call for her crew, Hood's bell. Sticking vertically out of the seabed emerges one of the largest, most recognizable and evocative images, the stern, the back end of the ship. On this very flagstaff, Hood proudly bore her white ensign as she toured the world. And then there is the most compelling discovery. One of the 4 large pieces of debris turns out to be Hood's front lookout platform, the conning tower. a giant 600-ton cylinder from just in front of the main bridge. Mysteriously, it has been blown over 1.5 miles away from the hull. The team suddenly wonders, could there have been more than one explosion?
I mean, is it possible in any way that after this aft 15-inch and 4-inch went up, that somehow, while it was still connected, that was enough to somehow ignite something in the forward section, that once she submerged, it actually did explode again?
The ROV's images strongly suggest that there was an explosion in the front part of the ship. This immediately drives Dr. Eric Grove to re-examine the historical evidence.
I've been looking again at some of the evidence at the inquiry, and 1 or 2 sailors on Prince of Wales said they thought they saw outward and visible signs of an explosion taking place in B turret, which would be actually more or less under the bit of ship we've just seen blown by some force or other, a very long way from the rest of the wreck. So I'm just beginning to think that perhaps that explosion, which seems almost certainly now to have begun in the after magazines, where there were over 100 tons of low explosive of cordite, seems to have vented forwards, coming upwards through the vents by the mainmast, through the engineering spaces, through the boiler rooms, and into B magazine.
The amazing conclusion of the expedition is that Hood didn't just blow up once, but twice. The back ammunition magazine started a huge inferno that set off the front.
But when you think about it, that's 200 tons of explosive going up. That's a huge explosion, almost like a small nuclear weapon. And again, this accounts for one of the mysteries that we did come out to solve. Why was it that only 3 people survived? Well, if you have the entire ship exploding, no wonder only 3 people survived.
Hood's sole living survivor, Ted Briggs, starts his journey to Iceland, from where he will sail out to the northern horizon. But as he boards his plane, without warning, the ROV submersible is hit by a complete technical failure.
Yeah, we've just had a GFI on the ROV. That's a ground fault interrupt, and you can see all of our video cameras are blank. And so they were recovering the vehicle in that process when it happened. And it's always a worrying thing. It just went out without any warning. Or we have no hint of what happened. And hopefully it's not a serious problem, but that could always be, a serious problem. If anything, it's going to be a nasty recovery, because now they've got to do a dead vehicle recovery, and the weather's not good.
But Ron Schmidt, head oceaneering engineer, is more cautious.
Generally concerned whether there's anything on the end of the string. The possibility is always there. You put something in the water, you never know if you're going to get it back. Every recovery is dangerous, and this one probably more so than others. A, because we're dealing with a pretty good sea state, pretty good swell out there, and B, because we've got a vehicle we can't control right now. It's essentially a clump weight. Therefore, when we get it to the surface, we can't drive it around on the surface. We can't control it in any means possible.
Without the ROV, there will be no more filming. Ted's plans to lay a memorial to his former comrades will be impossible to achieve. Without the ROV, the expedition will be over.
Is it very well popular?
Yes, they are coming from. It's a hot project to use.
Ted Briggs, the only living survivor of HMS Hood, arrives in Iceland and transfers to an ocean-going tug. It will take him the final 250 miles to where he last saw his sinking ship. "60 years ago, Ted Briggs and his two fellow survivors, Midshipman Bill Dundas and Seaman Bob Tilburn, spent over 3 hours in the freezing water.
I didn't think I was going to come through, because we're getting colder and colder, and bitterly cold, and the sea was not good. Dundas, who was sitting up on his raft, said, "There's a destroyer over there." I managed to look up, and there was, I could see this H-27. And of course I knew they'd started going Electra, and we were splashing the water. I think it was the chief boatswain's mate. He threw a rope down, which I managed to catch hold of. And he called out and said, "Don't you let go of that." I think it was just reaction. "You bet your bloody life I won't."
By the time HMS Electra arrived, they were close to death from hypothermia. They were also caked in engine oil from the hood. It may have kept them fractionally warmer and saved their lives.
Let's get about 30, 40 feet on deck, Troy. Big set. Ease up, ease up.
With Ted just over a day away, the ROV finally emerges from the Atlantic, but only just. The end of the 2-mile-long cable has nearly unscrewed itself from the depressor, the ROV's support module.
Easy, coming right.
Once we got on deck, we found this, which is it's the main umbilical that the vehicle hangs by. And what happened was there's such a strong current down there, it's causing the depressor to spin around. And it started to unscrew the termination, which has never happened in 12 years with this system. So it just spun it until it ripped it right in half. And another 3 turns and would have lost the whole shooting match. But we got it back on deck. We made some modifications to the termination so it won't unscrew. So everything should be good now.
Hi, Melissa. How are you? Yeah, everything's well. I just wanted to see how everybody made the trip and how Ted is.
With the ROV safely repaired and on its way back down, David can now concentrate on his next task, the arrival of the Hood's last survivor. After 24 hours hard steaming, Ted Briggs sees the northern horizon right on the spot where he last saw his own ship sink.
Northern horizon, lost in Iceland calling. Getting your fine, sir. Good morning again, Christian.
Glad to see you. Fantastic, isn't it? Yeah, it's great, Ted. We did it.
We're going to get there.
David decides the safest way to transfer Ted is to take him by rubber dinghy in a protective suit.
Take me to your leader.
Dave, come on, Dave. Now, go, Rich. Take him away from the side.
He's a big lad.
Yeah. Okay. Ted,
With Ted safely on board, David is at last able to show him his former ship. The ROV has had a successful last day. There are now many more pictures of Hood. Each with its own story to tell. Completely ripped off is a section of the back half of the ship on which are mounted the massive propellers. Just beneath them are the rudders, and they are permanently set in a turn to port. Many had doubted that Admiral Holland had called for this crucial turn, which would have protected his ship. The ROV pictures prove that Holland's tactics had been virtually perfect, only out by a few cruelly unlucky seconds. Lying close by is another extraordinary sight. It further corroborates the theory that the ship did not just split in two as eyewitnesses saw, but also exploded again at the front. The bow lies completely shorn off in one single 100-foot-long piece. The anchor chains stream out.
So that's the bow.
That is
on her side.
When I first saw it, I thought, that can't be the bow. And
Yeah.
then it so obviously is.
Yeah. Now this is where we would like to lay the plaque.
Yes.
Are you happy with that?
I would agree with that, yes.
Okay.
Well done, Troy.
Look out, you're 9 feet. Less than 9.
The ROV is being set up to carry a bronze memorial plaque to the sailors who lost their lives in Hood. Ted Briggs will release the claw to lay it.
Hold that.
Well done, Troy. Okay.
You want to release here? And this bottom button, please press that. Push ahead. Very nice. All right. Okay. All right.
Arm up, Ron. Ted, on behalf of Oceaneering and the Magellan Deepwater ROV crew, it's an honor to place this plaque in memory of those sailors.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
At last, there is a memorial on the battlefield beneath the waves. On it are the names of the 1,415 men who gave their lives on the 24th of May, 1941. This expedition has told a new generation of the sacrifice those sailors made.
So important because for years I've lived with it as a dreadful memory, and now it's something I can look back on with pride. A ghost laying day.
For over 20 years, HMS Hood ruled the waves. Her very existence was a feat of engineering unlikely to be repeated. Her loss proved to the British that the days of the big battleship were coming to a close. Celebrations on board the Bismarck were to be short-lived. The British wanted revenge. Less than 2 hours after the loss of HMS Hood, the Admiralty in London issued a now famous command. Every British warship and aircraft within striking distance was ordered to sink the Bismarck.